Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
Hello and welcome to Digitizing India, a Cisco initiative brought to you in association with CNBC TV 18. I'm Shireen Bhan and we're in conversation with Dinesh Malkani. Dinesh, appreciate you joining us here.
Thank you.
And it's good to have you back on the show to talk about the road ahead. We've had this conversation in the past about where things finally stand on the ground as far as the Smart City initiative is concerned. Since that conversation, it's been a couple of months and we've been on the road with Digitizing India for the last few months as well. Give us a sense of the ground reality.
So firstly, I think it was a master stroke to actually make it very competitive. Cities were asked to put in bids.
Yes.
The center looked at that, evaluated that, and has given out the ability for 33 cities almost to, basically progress. And in each one of those, it's also about making sure that there are milestones that are being met.
That's right.
So we moved from vision, which was in place a couple of years ago,
Yes.
to actually strategy, which was part of the whole process of putting in a plan and getting basically the money allocated. And the third place was actually making sure the dollars, resources get provided to the cities. Now we're moving into actually getting work done on the ground.
So execution.
And eventually it is going to be about that, right? Actually, if you think about it, some of the cities have set up SPVs. And so you don't have to worry about going to police separately and going to waste management separately. You have an SPV, the SPV takes care of the entire smart city implementation. You don't have to worry about silos getting created. They're looking at an integrated platform and architecture, and on that they'll start to build the application.
I want to take forward the SPV argument that you were making and how that in fact has streamlined the execution process and made it easier for companies like yourself to participate in the Smart City initiative. If you can take us through that experience, and is it different across different cities that you're operating in?
I think the model is in place. There have been a lot of realization that that's probably the right way to go. Because our fear always is that if you do things in silos, then things don't talk to each other. When you're trying to monetize the infrastructure that you put down, you need to have an integrated play. You're going down a road, traffic, parking need to be integrated. Environmental sensors need to be put in place so that they're measuring the impact to the environment and how they should divert traffic around. So every one of these are different applications, but you have to connect the dots. With the formation of an SPV, that makes things easier. And by the way, it makes things move even faster.
So how many are you involved with today?
Well, we've done about 8 or 9 good, solid projects. We started out a few years ago. We've got 8 or 9 projects done, whether it was in Bhopal or Jaipur or Vijayawada. And then now, probably out of the 33, I'd say half of them are very active in getting their proposals put together. We've had some RFPs come out. So Nagpur is the latest one. We've basically got Delhi as well. And
how competitive is it?
Oh, it's going to be very competitive. At the end of the day, and that's what's going to drive innovation. From our side, we keep innovating every day, because at the end of the day, it's, what works in some parts of the world is not going to work here. And we've learned a lot. We've been at it for the last 5-7 years, but I can't be more encouraged about the way that things have moved, and I think the real execution over the next 2 to 3 years is just going to be phenomenal.
But what are the learnings on the ground? Because it's easier to do things when you're actually operating in a greenfield situation. But here you're working within existing infrastructure, within existing systems. How challenging does that make this task of trying to smarten up an existing city?
It's difficult, but I'll tell you there are some benefits of doing it in an existing city. The first is, where the biggest need is. Where the traffic congests. Where waste is a problem and how to move that along, right? So you have the data available. As far as you focus on getting the data and you analyze it, then the first step is where the need is. The second is, it is going to take innovation. You can't dig through a brownfield city. That is very difficult. So there are 2 things we've done. We've started to look at innovative ways in first how the city is going to get connected. In Andhra, we used aerial fiber on electric poles. We're starting to look at Wi-Fi and how that gets deployed at a much larger scale, LoRa networks, etc. So innovation in trying to make sure that you can work on a brownfield city without actually having to break it down to make it smarter, right? And then the third thing is monetization strategies. In a brownfield city, where the need is, you put the right things in place, but when you monetize it, you go to businesses and say, by the way, at this traffic junction, every day in the morning, you have 30,000 cars or motorcycles that pass through, and so you pay me X amount of rupees for the ad banners, and it's a differentiated pricing model. But it becomes easier to actually monetize it compared to a greenfield. Challenging because of the situation that is there, but also the most need, and I always believe where there is demand, supply eventually shows up.
You were talking about some of the innovations that you've been able to take forward to try and work around the challenges of working within an existing city. But from a government response point of view, and you're working across different states at this point, are you seeing innovations at the government level as well?
I think the creation of an SPV and getting the right framework in place, getting the right consultants in place was very critical right in the beginning. So I got to give credit to the government in the way that they have moved at a very fast pace to actually get that much happen, right? When it comes to innovation, look, there are many innovations, and I'm sure we are doing some, there are other companies that are doing some. The pace at which proof of concepts are being implemented, I talked about a big one we're doing in Vijayawada. There is direct involvement right from the CM to the Commissioner to make sure that that goes well, and so all the things are cleared to ensure that, we at a very quick pace get that job done and then build on top of it and also learn out of it, right?
Speaking of funding, Dinesh, do you believe that the current allocation is going to be enough to be able to take these cities to the objectives that the government has articulated as part of the Smart City vision? Or do you believe that we are going to be forced to sort of come up with innovations even as far as funding is concerned?
So I think it's both. It's good enough to get a framework in place. It's good enough to get some early successes in areas where there's most need. But eventually you need to look at some PPP kind of models, right? Because once the infrastructure is deployed, you absolutely should monetize it, right? The fiber net that's getting laid out in AP, 2 million homes is where it's going to go to, but it's a monetization strategy behind that, right? So clearly, I would say initial successes, yes, there's enough funding to be able to do that, and then eventually look for different models basically to be deployed. The one thing I do want to talk about is that in a brownfield city, you can easily say that, oh, why are you allocating it to smart things when my roads are not enough, right? In India, we're going to have 404 million people, according to a report that was released, that will move from rural areas to urban areas. 404 million. That's like adding 2 Singapores moving every year, or 1 Sao Paulo, right? You can spend the money on keep on building more infrastructure, or actually use it on smartening the existing infrastructure you have.
Since you were talking about public-private partnerships and the importance and criticality of putting good PPPs in place, we haven't really had much success with public-private partnerships in India, and which is why the government feels the need now to overhaul the very basis of PPPs across different sectors. But specifically from a smart city perspective, what would be imperative as far as the PPP model is concerned?
So, I was amazed that India is actually one of the largest countries where PPPs have happened.
With the most number of PPPs, absolutely, but not all of them functioning as they ought to.
No, and we've got to learn from them. So there are many which have been successful. There are many which have not resulted in benefits for both parties, right? There's enough learning examples that are there. The thing about smart cities you got to understand though is that it's very data driven. When you have data, you analyze the data, you can come up with very objective ways in how you actually monetize that information, right? So it's not like one of those projects where it's done where you don't know what the real consumption is. This is highly data driven, and that's why I actually believe that in smart cities there is an opportunity to make success out of it, provided we learn a little bit of the challenges we face and use data driven models, capture the information, use it for areas where actually people are looking for that information today. If you ask businesses, they're looking for data about what's happening in their city so that the next restaurant that gets set up can be done at the right location because you have the most number of people that actually pass through it.
Let me ask you about the challenges that you're facing in some of the projects that you worked with, more from the perspective of what the lessons or the learnings have been. And you talked about Jaipur, you talked about what you're doing in Vijayawada, etc. What have been the key insights that you've been able to sort of get from these projects that you're now going to put in action as you move towards the rest of the plate that you're working with?
See, the first thing is where we have had strong leadership, where the leader is completely committed to saying, this is important, it's not just a tick in the box, I want to see real benefits.
And you mean political leadership?
Political leadership as well as leadership within the government, right? I think those projects are usually a success, because this is not about putting a tick in the box. This is actually doing it, measuring it, learning from it and improving in it, right? So I think that's the first ingredient. The second thing that I find is that definitely in the brownfield cities, you know, because of all the challenges we see on the streets every day, we are working in mainly outdoor environments, and so your technology goes through a lot, right? And some of it is very sophisticated technology. It goes through a lot. We've had to go back to the drawing board and actually start to innovate very heavily on how that technology will work in these environments, right? And you know, that took a long
time. Has it meant a significant amount of modification or tweaking on your part?
It's involved a lot of ruggedization. It's involved working in environments that we have never seen before. The good thing is I've got that engineering center right in the backyard, right, which does all that work. So what we're putting in now has pretty much gone through a lot of rigor, and sometimes, you know, we always feel, well, it would have been great if things had moved faster, but then maybe we would have been we would not have spotted these sort of, you know, challenges. The pilots have helped. They were very challenging. We've had to go back and rework things and then move it forward. The other thing is on cost as well, right? Because today you're reaching a scale where you can bring the cost down. Because in the beginning, when you do smaller bespoke projects in silos, the cost element can be very high.
So how much have costs come down by?
I would say just by setting up the SPV and leveraging on it, probably a 15-20% range would be a good number to work with, from versus if you worked it in a silo model. And as things scale, I mean, humongous, right? You just think of the scale that can happen in India. I think costs will start to basically come down even further, and that's what will make it more affordable to basically, you know, essentially get it done.
What's exciting you about some of the projects that you're working with? I know you're very excited about the Vijayawada project, but some of the other projects that you're working on currently, what excites you the most about them?
Direct impact. So the ones we are doing around smart lighting, there is an absolute reduction in energy that is being consumed. The ones we are looking at from a sort of education perspective, right? You know, the last statistic I saw in the schools that we've worked with the state governments, we've used digital technologies, 20% increase in attendance. And these are government schools where normally the attendance is a little bit on the lower side. It's up by 20% in the schools they're using digital technology. Grades have improved by 25%. You know, we always talk about the fact that you bring the best education and offer it to anybody in the country, grades went up by 25%. So I'm seeing direct impact that is coming out of it, right? Whether it was a number of challans that got cut in Lucknow or now in Bhopal or in Navi Mumbai, which is operated now for the last 3 years. And you know, that's what it's all about. Otherwise, these will be failed projects if you did not see the actual sort of benefits that actually, you know, basically, and you know, that's been the fun part of getting it done. And now that we have proven success, it's just multiplying every day.
So what does the road ahead look like? You talked about some of the RFPs that you're going to be bidding for. What can we typically expect over the next 12 to 24 months?
So execution, the 31 or 33 cities, work has to get done. You know, they were given enough time to have the strategy, the vision, get that right. With tenders coming out, we will move for execution. We are gearing up. We just opened a new global delivery center in Pune, which we are going to ramp up, right? We're going to put more services skills. I like the fact that a lot of the MSIs are gearing up, L&T, ILFS, you know, the companies that were very good at infrastructure deployment, they are now looking at technology and how to integrate that whole thing, right? So things have started moving. I see a big role for the startups. Because, you know, at the end of the day, one is infrastructure, but on top of that, you need smart applications. You know, everything's going to be on the mobile phone. And so startups are starting to enter in that phase. We have partnered with some state governments to open 3 or 4 incubation centers, innovation centers, where the startups will partner. We will deploy the infrastructure that most of the cities are going to use and let them build applications on top of it, right? And I think that's how you'll start to see a lot of momentum catch up in deployments. But that really is the road ahead. It's not going to be simple, Shreen, I can assure you that, right?
No, I'm quite certain it isn't.
Yeah, and it's going to take 2 or 3 years to see those early successes in specific areas. I think the biggest demand is around safety and security. around traffic management, around waste management. Even if we can get 3 or 4 of these right, I think the road ahead will look really bright.
Given the opportunity that you see here in India today, give me a sense of what Cisco would probably be spending over the next 5 years in terms of incremental investments here in India.
So we every year increase
I know
the
you have
spend
an annual budget, yes.
We have an annual budget, but that keeps going up,
Yeah.
right? So the latest we did was about 100 million increase from what we have been doing. We've put that money aside largely to invest into companies because deep technology companies are starting to sort of emerge in India. We want to invest in those, grow the startup ecosystem. We are setting up incubation centers in 3 of the states. We're doing the smart city projects together with the government where we are co-investing in some of them. You know, we've gone ahead and started looking at partnering with NASSCOM, etc., to set up IoT innovation centers. We're setting up center of excellences. Skills is going to be very important, digital skills, because you need a digitally
I know the
literate
minister
population.
is putting immense pressure on Cisco as far as that is concerned.
He is, and I think rightfully so. So we said 250,000 students over the next 3 years we will take through our Net Academies. It's a year-long program, by the way. You get a proper CCNA you know, certification out of that. 95% of them get employed, and the demand there is huge, right? So we're trying to ramp that up. But what we've also done is we realized that one is programs like that, but we're also making IoT and security available in a completely different manner virtually. We could scale up to 1 million students to just train them on what is IoT all about, how to manage security in an environment, because that's a big topic as well. So these are the few areas that we are working on the skills. But Shireen, we've been committed. We believe that India will be one of the most digitized countries in the world. It's on the right path. And I think with these investments, we're accelerating and supporting the digitization of the country.
So let's end with that then, because you know we always talk about how smart cities will have to be aligned to the Digital India objective and vision. We've only recently heard from the government that the next round of spectrum auctions will perhaps happen sometime around August. The Digital India has its own 9 pillars in terms of the objectives that it wants to take forward. How confident do you feel about the Digital India story today?
So India is absolutely on the roll from a digitization perspective, right? With 1 billion people having mobile phones in their hand, with almost 200 million having smartphones, with data consumption like we have never seen before. In fact, the latest release that we did on our VNI was 2019 equivalent data of 12 billion DVDs will be downloaded every year in India. So digitization is something that is being driven equally by the people, the government and businesses. And look at the way businesses are disrupting, right? Because they are saying it's the best way for me to reach out to people, reduce my cost and scale like I've never done before. The disruptors are coming in. You've seen a lot of investment happen in that area. So as a headline, we called it out 2 or 3 years ago, if you remember, Shireen. We said India digitization absolutely going to happen. It's on the roll right now. In terms of allocation of spectrum, in terms of getting more and more broadband, you know, it's basically a demand-supply curve, right? Demand is at an all-time high, so supply is being made available, right? The Make in India program, at least from where we see, incentives are getting better for people to start moving in, and eventually you'll see an export model basically out of here. We have to think about how to make it more inclusive, so getting the national broadband project rolled out into remote areas, getting them access to the internet. Every second, 3 Indians are getting connected to the internet, which means they get better education, they get, you know, ability to participate in business. Over time, you know, with all these things coming together, I think with an inclusive society, you'll see a very different India. I say 3 to 5 years, digital transformation is the one that will make us leapfrog.
You know, since we're talking about digital transformation, leapfrogging, Indian companies going global, global companies perhaps are finally going to start to set up, or we're finally going to start to see global supply chains being set up here in India, with the likes of Apple maybe now coming to India and setting up their own stores. They'll also be forced in that sense then to procure domestically, maybe a couple of years down the line as per the new retail policy. But do you believe that we are now going to see, you know, a robust global supply chain, specifically as far as this sector is concerned?
I think the good news is we are listening. We are understanding that when a company comes into a country, it is impossible for you to have a huge percentage of your sourcing done locally. And so time has been given. That works very well for us also, by the way, because at the end of the day, we are setting up our plant, and we are going to start to make our products here. But then it helps to have that capability of fab and PCBs getting made here. It takes time. But the more and more MNCs that move in, the more ecosystem partners move in. And when they start moving in, you become self-sufficient. Otherwise, you got to keep importing from a Taiwan or from a China, and that is added cost, and there's a cost differential that actually comes in. I view this as a positive move, and one that I think a lot of technology companies have been asking for. And the net result will be, at the end of the day, it will drive more innovation, right? We did that in the BPO industry many years ago. We gave them the ability to participate.
And then drove the BPO industry out of India.
No, but it has resulted in a phenomenal ITS industry. See, that's a byproduct. At the end of the day, you started somewhere, and look at the size of the Indian ITS industry. And it would not have happened if we didn't take some steps, right? And, at the end of the day, I view these as positive steps. Where it will net up is, it will create an ecosystem, right? With all the big names coming and tell you that eventually it makes so much more sense for the ecosystem to actually show up here, start participating, and make us much more self-sufficient.
Okay, so on that note, Dinesh, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18 and taking us through where things currently stand as far as the Smart City Initiative is concerned, and that we have reason to be optimistic about where things are headed. As you said, the train has clearly left the station, so we're waiting to see how this journey unfolds. But thanks very much for your time. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Digitizing India, brought to you in association with Cisco. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.